My parents want my sister to walk down the aisle at my wedding first, so my husband pretends to go along. He gets them to pay for the most expensive wedding, and their plan is ruined. My parents loved my sister more. I don't mean in subtle ways, either. If my sister accused me of something, they'd believe it and punish me. If I accused her, they wouldn't believe me. Even if there were undeniable proof, they'd still give her a lesser punishment and try to find a way to scold me in tandem. My birthday cake had to be a flavor she wanted. Hers did not, and my parents always denied knowing I didn't like that type of cake. They always bought her a bit more than for me. We went to where she wanted, even if it was an event that should be about me. My sister grew up spoiled and didn't like me. She just used me as a punching bag. Eventually, my mom came to talk to me about my impending graduation. She told me that since they were paying for my sister's college tuition, they had no money to pay for mine, so it would be better for me to start working immediately after graduation and wait until my sister finished uni to see if they could afford something for me. If I decided to stay home, I'd have to pay for all my stuff, some of the bills, and rent. I pointed out I could get student loans. Mom said yes, except no. That is, because they were so caring towards me, and I had such bad judgment, they would decide if a college was worth my getting in debt or not. They had no idea about my grades and never believed in my capabilities. I never believed they would eventually pay it if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I had been preparing for college for a long time. I could barely go out. My friendships were slim, so I had a lot of time to study. I studied because I saw college as my only chance to be free. Well, the time came, and I worked my ass off and got a scholarship. Not anywhere like the Ivy League or anything like law or medical school, but it was a good enough course in a decent college with a full scholarship. Knowing my sister would hate it and try to stop me via my parents, I put my achievements on social media at the same time I told them. I even forced myself to thank them in the post. They weren't happy but couldn't do anything. College was my savior. I started being happy. I met my husband around this time. My husband is the guy who claps back immediately. He loves drama in that he loves to resolve it. He's the guy that if he doesn't immediately reply to a slight, you better start worrying because he won't forgive and forget. He's just doing something worse for revenge. When we discussed marriage, we decided we didn't care much about the ceremony due to our budget, as we'd rather spend on a dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. At this point, my parents naturally demanded that they meet my man. My parents and my sister sat him down. After grumbling about not being okay with him, my judgment, etc., they proclaimed they would pay for my wedding. My sister would walk down the aisle at my wedding first, in a wedding dress. Their excuse was that it wasn't okay for a younger sister to marry first, so it was only fair if my sister had at least the experience of it. On my venue, with pictures being taken, and the dress, and she'd have a cake later, etc. He went back to my parents. He said he probed and thought I wouldn't be down with it. However, he didn't see the issue and, not wanting the family to fall apart, would be down to helping them do it. He pointed out I don't like conflict, so if I was surprised by it, I might not throw a tantrum in front of all the people. Thus, he suggested a compromise. They'd help pay for stuff. This way, I would feel even more pressure not to say anything, as not only would we be public, but I'd be grateful for the help they gave, which mollify me. And so began the months of deception, where my parents and sister thought they were tricking me, and my husband and I were milking them. How? Well, rather than pay for the wedding and lay low, my parents wanted input in everything. What we did was thus: we'd go, say, to check the drink and menu options. We'd then accept the lowest or second lowest priced option. My husband would then secretly take my sister there to try it out, then sigh and say it's a pity we don't want to abuse my parents' goodwill so we wouldn't get the best options. Cue my sister demanding my parents pay for the best. My parents would then tell me not to worry, and they'd pay for the most expensive. The same was done with the photographer. Flowers. My husband handed my sister a bouquet of the flowers we wanted, then sadly expressed how I wanted some other, tasteless flower. My parents told me they wanted us to go with the flowers, and they'd pay for it. Wedding dress. We hit a minor snag here. My parents wanted me to wear a hideous dress, but he never told them we hired security. It was really funny. My husband and I, who had sincerely considered a courthouse wedding to focus the cost on our honeymoon, had this extravagant wedding and barely spent a dime. We called it back pay for emotional damages from my parents. Soon, the day came. The plan my parents/sister/husband had come up with was to wait until everyone was seated. Since the bride always comes out late, they'd have my sister arrive at that precise time and walk down the aisle. As the guests and my parents arrived, all they could see was a woman with a list of names to check. Only after my parents arrived and sat down did we bring out security. A guy that looked like a bodyguard. We told him not to allow my sister in and even agreed to pay a handsome tip if he didn't reveal we told him that. Soon, the time arrived. My parents got a text. My sister was less than 5 minutes away, so my dad told people to start. My bridesmaids had been told to follow his lead beforehand, so they obeyed without checking with me. After they all went down and took their places, my dad stood up at the entrance as if waiting for me. During this time, a friend who was not at the wedding party texted me to get ready. Well, as soon as my dad took his position, the bridal song started playing, and the doors opened. I come in. My dad looked aghast at me being there. He tried glancing behind me, but you couldn't see the venue entrance from where we were, so he couldn't see what happened to my sister. And then his phone rang. I saw the caller ID, and it was her. He just left me there with a mumbled, "Something came up." There were gasps and confusion all around. The friend in on it loudly asked what happened. In a teary voice, I lied and said he told me. It wasn't supposed to be me there. The friend then loudly went, "What did he mean by it shouldn't be you?" So that as many people as possible could hear and spread it, then went, "I will go and check," and ran off. We decided to do this to make her create hell with the security and stop my dad from returning and stopping the ceremony or something. At some point, my mom also left. At this point, my husband's dad quickly ran over and took my arm. He'd been forewarned he might need to. Watching him run desperately to me helped me smile. I walked down the aisle to whispers as people discussed what happened. Some left to check, too. When I reached my husband, though, all was well. He made me feel better. The following is the sum account from friends, family, the security guy, and my husband that I received afterward. My sister did arrive in a wedding dress. The security refused to let her in. The three naturally said it wasn't a secret and threw my husband under the bus. At this point, my husband was summoned. When he came over, he put on his best look of confusion and denied having ever agreed to something so ridiculous. When they insisted he did, he demanded proof, and of course, they couldn't produce any. My sister was screaming and crying and sat on the floor, kicking her legs like a kid, watching my parents and sister get ripped apart by anyone and everyone who came out to check. The drama was delicious. After years and years of being accused of stuff and not believed, to watch them have a taste was one of the best wedding gifts. My mother was crying. My dad kept changing from purple to white, and my sister was still on the floor, crying and screaming. They kept insisting that my husband was in on it, but people kept asking why my husband would agree, why there was no proof, and why they wanted my sister to do this to my wedding, and they had no good answer to any of it. Eventually, they were told to leave and had no choice but to do so. My dad had to drag my sister up as she refused to leave the ground. Of course, the three have tried to contact me since that whole thing. I've refused calls because my husband insisted on keeping a paper trail. It was a smart thing because my sister eventually messaged me. She blamed me for her humiliation and called my husband a two-faced snake that fooled them for months. My husband took my phone, screenshot the call logs, screenshot my sister's message, screenshot some messages of my parents demanding I pick up the phone, and sent it all to my family group chat. He wrote a message and said group chat begging my family for help, as I was now being harassed by them constantly. He begged his family to help stop them from trying to ruin my honeymoon now that they had failed to ruin my wedding. My family assured him they'd take care of it, and indeed, since then, we've had silence. All in all, while I obviously would have preferred to have a normal, loving family at my wedding, at least for once in my life, they not only failed to ruin something meaningful to me, but I got them back.